It is Friday night and you are at a restaurant with friends. The bill arrives. 3 years ago, you would have calculated your share in dollars, immediately requested payment via Venmo, and felt guilty about the $14 main course. Now you earn $90,000 a year instead of $45,000. You glance at the total, hand over your card, say, "I'll cover it," and don't think about it again. A fundamental shift has occurred in your mind, not just in your bank account. Your entire relationship with money has transformed at a threshold you didn't even notice. My name is Logan Wolfe, and I've studied how people's financial psychology changes as their income levels rise. When you get a raise and don't understand why your money stress doesn't decrease proportionally, or when you are earning significantly more than before, yet still feel broke. Subscribe, because what I am about to show you explains why income level and financial behavior operate on completely different paths. Here is what no one tells you about earning more money. Your financial behavior doesn't develop in a straight line. It jumps in stages, and these jumps occur at predictable thresholds for millions of people. These aren't smooth transitions. They're cliff edges where your entire financial psychology is fundamentally rewritten. The first threshold is probably an annual income of $45,000 to $50,000 if you have an average job. Below that, whether you admit it or not, you are in survival mode. You may have lived your life in survival mode before, but after years of hard work, you've reached a standard income level. At this income level, every unexpected expense causes anxiety. You check your bank balance several times a week. Spending $50 without planning feels reckless. Your financial decisions focus on one question: will this bankrupt me? Will I run out of money this month? Will I have to use my credit card limit again because of unplanned expenses? At this level, financial stress manifests itself physically. Your chest tightens when the bills arrive. You avoid checking your banking app. You lie awake calculating whether you can afford the upcoming car insurance payment. Money is not an abstract concept. It is instinctive. Every dollar has a specific purpose, and losing one feels dangerous. Something changes after you pass $50,000. Not dramatically, but noticeably. You stop checking your account every day. Small, unexpected expenses become annoying rather than catastrophic. A $200 car repair doesn't send you into a panic. It is annoying, but it is not a crisis you've entered. What I call the breathing space. This change happens not only in your account balance, but also in your nervous system. You stop mentally calculating prices while shopping. You can say yes to a spontaneous dinner invitation without immediately checking your balance. The constant low-level financial anxiety that influenced every decision begins to fade. You are not rich, but you won't spiral into disaster when you have a bad week anymore. However, there is a trap at this level. You feel like you've made it, and so you might take risky moves. You are earning more than average. You should feel rich instead. You feel a little less stressed, but you don't feel secure. Why? Because the cost of basic stability has risen faster than your income. In the 1980s, $50,000 in today's money was enough to support a family, own a home, and save for retirement. Today, in most cities, $50,000 barely covers rent, transportation, and food expenses, leaving no money for savings. Federal Reserve data reveals a harsh reality. The average household income is approximately $75,000 per year. The average household debt is $145,000. The average person is earning more than ever before in nominal terms, but is deeper in debt than ever before in real terms. You crossed the threshold, but the finish line moved. This is the reality of the system. The volume of money increased, but its value decreased. Once you reach $50,000, your behavior changes predictably. Most people start using credit cards differently. Previously, credit cards were only for emergencies, and you paid them off immediately out of fear. Then, credit cards became tools that provided convenience. Banks studied human psychology and set up this game in the way that would be most profitable for them. In the first stage, you probably start carrying a low-limit credit card. It is not that big, just $2,000 or $3,000. It seems manageable. That is where lifestyle inflation starts. Not with luxury shopping, with convenient shopping. Ordering food instead of cooking. Uber instead of the bus. Subscription services you don't really need, but can technically afford. It pays to be very careful here and to be financially literate. The second threshold is between $75,000 and $85,000. You finally managed to reach the US average, or even slightly above it. At this point, your relationship with money can completely change. Below this threshold, you are still making compromises. Should I buy those nice shoes or save this month? Above this threshold, small purchases become invisible. Most people probably stop tracking individual transactions. A $30 dinner doesn't make it into the records. An $80 grocery run requires no justification. You are on autopilot. This invisibility is both freedom and a trap. You gain mental space. You are no longer constantly doing micro calculations, but you lose the feedback loop that keeps spending in check. At $50,000, you felt every purchase at $80,000. Purchases under $100 get lost among card swipes and automatic payments. Banks notice this shift. Once you pass $75,000, you are no longer in the fee collection zone. You enter the investment sales funnel. You start receiving emails about wealth management services, mortgage pre-approvals for amounts that seem crazy, credit limit increases you didn't ask for. The bank's attitude towards you changes because you've crossed the threshold where you no longer look like someone to charge fees to, but someone worth building a relationship with. Banks now see you as safe and want you to make them money. This is where people make their biggest mistake, because banks offer them more credit and more investment products. They assume they are ready for them, but they are not. Most people with an income of $80,000 have not built any foundation. They have $5,000 in savings. They have no retirement accounts other than a barely funded 401k. But because the bank treats them as if they are successful, they feel successful. Above $85,000, your spending psychology shifts from scarcity to optimization. You no longer ask, "Can I afford this?" You ask, "Am I using this money in the best way possible?" You start comparing options. Premium economy class versus business class. Index funds versus managed funds. You are still price conscious, but your anxiety is gone. Money ceases to be a constant source of stress and becomes a tool for optimization. At this threshold, knowing the rules of the game and acting consciously will be very beneficial for you. The third threshold is $150,000. At this point, money ceases to be the fundamental obstacle to most decisions. You don't earn as much as Jeff Bezos, but you earn enough that you no longer need to make financial calculations in your daily life. You have probably achieved financial freedom. You go to the market and buy what you want. If you see something you need, you buy it. The mental burden of constantly budgeting disappears. However, at this level, something happens that probably no one warns you about. Your peer group changes, and with it, your reference points change. When you were making $50,000, you compared yourself to people making $50,000. Now you are making $150,000, and suddenly you are in the same environment as people making $300,000 or $500,000. Even though your absolute position has improved significantly, your relative position feels lower. The hedonic treadmill speeds up here. My mindset on this subject has always been, I don't compare myself to anyone else. If I am better off than I was the year before, I am quite successful. I don't compare myself to anyone else. If you do compare, maybe you upgrade your apartment from $1,500 to $3,000 because you can afford it and everyone in your new peer group lives in similar places. You'll probably rent a nicer car because going to client meetings in a 2015 Camry now feels weird. You start traveling more, eating out more, subscribing to more services. None of this seems excessive to most people. It is a normal income for your income level. But here is the mathematical calculation that has the potential to break people at this threshold. If your annual income is $150,000, your net income after taxes is approximately $100,000 to $120,000. If your fixed expenses are $60,000 per year, you have $40,000 left for savings and discretionary spending. This may seem like a lot. However, if you spend $15,000 on vacations, $10,000 on dining out, and $8,000 on hobbies and entertainment, you are saving $7,000 per year. You earn $150,000 and are actually disciplined. However, if you spend $15,000 on vacations, $10,000 on eating out, and $8,000 on hobbies and entertainment, you are saving $7,000 a year. You earn $150,000, yet you are saving less than someone who earns $60,000 but is disciplined. I've seen this pattern dozens of times. Someone goes from $70,000 to $150,000 in 5 years. They feel rich. They upgrade everything. 5 years later, they have $30,000 saved, less than they would have had if they had stayed at $70,000 and not changed their lifestyle. The income increase didn't create wealth. It financed a more expensive version of the same life, a version with increased consumption above $150,000 investment behavior changes. Below that threshold, most people don't invest beyond their 401k. Above it, they start opening brokerage accounts, they start thinking about real estate, they start asking their friends about private equity or angel investing. Not because they suddenly become financially sophisticated. It is because they've crossed the threshold that makes investing feel possible, not just theoretical, but most people don't have the foundation for this. They're investing while still carrying credit card debt. They buy rental property without an emergency fund. They can make moves that resemble wealth creation, but are actually just risk layering. Income has given them access to sophisticated financial tools before they've developed the discipline to use them properly. The fourth threshold is between $250,000 and $300,000. This is where financial behavior really changes below this level. You are still thinking in terms of compromise. Above this level, you start thinking in terms of systems. You don't ask, can I afford this vacation? You ask, does this vacation fit into my annual travel budget? You don't track individual purchases. You track categories and trends. Above $300,000, most people hire financial advisors, not because they suddenly need help. It is because they've crossed the threshold where getting help is seen as normal, not extravagant. They start prioritizing tax optimization. They start companies. They probably open SEP IRAs and solo 401k accounts. They do estate planning even if they're 35 years old. But there is a trap at this level. Your expenses can still grow in proportion to your income. I know people who earn $400,000 but have less savings than those earning $150,000. Sounds like a joke, right? They have everything better, but they're in the same financial cycle, just running faster. Their core behaviors haven't changed at all. They've just upgraded their accessories. Now let's talk about what really matters at all these thresholds. Income level determines your behavior less than you might think. Behavioral discipline determines your results more than you think. I've seen people earning $60,000 with $100,000 in investments. I've seen people earning $200,000 with negative net worth. The difference isn't income. The difference is whether your behavior stays tied to your previous income level as your earnings increase. Here is what I think is very important. When your money increases, it is beneficial to stay at the standard of living you had at your previous income level for a while and get used to your new income level. Doing this does not make you stingy. It may take time to get used to an income level you have never reached before, and you may make wrong moves. In this case, it would be beneficial to use your money carefully as you did in your previous life. People who accumulate wealth do not allow their expenses to increase proportionally with their income. They experience inflation in their lifestyle not by accident, but intentionally. They determine for themselves which upgrades are truly important and which are merely status symbols. Here's a framework that works at all income levels. For example, first you can determine your minimum viable lifestyle. What is the cheapest annual cost at which you could be satisfied without feeling deprived? For some, this figure is $40,000. For others, it is $60,000. The figure itself is not important. What matters is knowing this. Secondly, you can establish a rule that when your investment accounts reach certain milestones, your lifestyle expenses may increase. Have your investments reached $50,000? You can upgrade your apartment by $200 per month. Have your investments reached $100,000? You can upgrade your car. Have they reached $250,000? You can increase your travel budget. This ties lifestyle inflation to wealth creation rather than income increases also. Speaking of investments, I would like to remind you that no investment advice is given on this channel. Third, you can automate the difference between your income and your lifestyle expenses. If you earn $100,000 and your lifestyle costs $60,000, you can automatically invest $30,000 annually in investments you choose and calculate the risk yourself before touching that money. The remaining $10,000 is your buffer for irregular expenses. This can prevent the psychological trap of thinking, I am earning more, so I can spend more. Fourth, you can consciously change your friend groups. If you earn $150,000 and all your friends earn $250,000, you may constantly feel broke. You can find communities built around financial independence, not consumption competition. Your reference points shape your behavior more than your income. Fifth, track your net worth, not your income. Income feeds the ego. Net worth is real progress. Someone earning $80,000 with $200,000 in net worth is better off than someone earning $200,000 with $50,000 in net worth. The first person is still building the foundation. The second person is building the facade. It is important to understand this, and I realized it a bit late. You can earn more than average, but if most of that money goes to consumption, people who earn less than you but know how to manage that money are the ones who hold financial freedom. Income thresholds matter. They change the odds, but they don't determine the odds. Your behavior determines that. Behavior is a choice you make every day, regardless of how much you earn. If this video showed you something about your own financial behavior patterns, subscribe. I analyze the psychology behind money decisions and the specific frameworks that enable real financial progress. You can write your current income threshold in the comments. We'll discuss it in the comments. Are you in survival mode in breathing room? On autopilot? Let's compare what has actually changed for you. See you in the next video.